Yes, sir. Chapter number 11, the book of Hebrews. Appreciate that prayer, Pastor. I don't know if anybody noticed or not, but whenever he got done praying, I didn't hear anything or anybody say, yeah, done. Good job, Sean. Everything that he just done is what we're going to be talking about this morning. His prayer was by faith. It was by faith. And whether you recognize it or not, if you're awake, almost everything that you do is by faith. Okay? Most of the time, believe it or not, or most of you people, I'm sure, most folks, maybe just one or two, got here tonight and you exercise more faith than you probably believe, right? Because you got in a 3,000 to 6,000 pound projectile. That thing had several 100,000 explosions in it as your way here, right? But you made it. You don't have a clue who made the brakes. You don't know what kind of materials they used. But every time you mashed on that pedal, you didn't realize it, but you were exercising faith, right? And that was really experiential faith, because last time I got in it, it started up, nothing happened, hit the brakes, everything worked, but still it was faith. Right? You were operating by faith. Our whole lives, whether we know it, whether it be spiritual or whether it be in the world, we operate by faith. You are trusting in that pew that you're sitting in right now. You're operating by faith. When you sat down, you didn't take no calls. You didn't go, come on, Tess. You didn't look over somebody. Sit right there and see if that thing hold us up right there. I'm not real sure. I don't know if I believe or not. You know? But you're exercising that faith, right? So faith is all around us. Faith is in every part of our lives. There's a difference, though, in obviously in that scriptural faith, in spiritual faith, right? In Hebrews chapter number 11, verse number 1, and as I was reading this and I seen this one coming up, I told Robert last week, I seen where he was going to be finishing up at, and I knew that he had, several verses to get through, and I was like, brother, I'm so glad that you made it through all of those. And because I've been thinking about this verse and I've just been pondering it, just been thinking, I got notes that's like just on little pieces of paper, front and back. So we're probably going to be all over. Because I'll just be doing different things. I'll be mowing, think about something, I'll be at work on the drive and think, oh man, that's, and I'll write that down. So I have little notes and stuff all over the place. So we're going to try to keep it lined up though. But when I first read through this and I knew where we was coming, I got to thinking about it, it's like, you know what, man? Just these first two verses, we could probably make 4 or 5 rounds just through those first few verses and never even get close to exhausting it, right? Because it's very similar. I got to thinking about it today. It's very similar. There's so many aspects of faith. There's so many facets of faith. Just how it's so entangled in everything that we do. It's like standing outside whenever it's snowing and you've got like a black suit on and you can see all of the snowflakes, and every one of them, all of them different. Faith is the same way. There's so much to it. So I'm just going to try to bring out just a couple things. I'm not going to get anywhere close to exhausting this by no means. These are some things that as I seen where we was going, I was trying to read ahead and stuff, and I'm thinking about it, and things will just kind of pop up in your head, watching different shows, listening to different things, like, wow, that's got an application. Well, I think that'll hit, right? And what's funny is one of the things that I'm going to talk about tonight is you've heard me probably bring this up before, but I like listening to a particular podcast, okay? And the guy's name, and I think I got clearance to this, is Jocko Willink. I don't know how many of you have ever heard of Jocko Willink, but I love listening to this guy. He's got fantastic podcasts, not necessarily Christian, but as far as leadership and understanding, accountability, ownership, he's changed my life. He's got a book called Extreme Ownership. First time that I read through it, I actually went back on Amazon and left a rating and said, there's been no other book. This is the only other book besides the Bible that has changed my life, that has drastically changed it. It's a fantastic book. It's so good that, as a matter of fact, whenever we bought David this bike that he has, I made him read it twice before he could get on the bike. And then tell me. And he did, and I was tickled to death. He was just popping stuff off. He said, I learned about this. That's what I'm talking about. That stuff will get in there and stick, right? And there's a caution whenever we come up, or there is a caution with me sometimes because, you know, in this venue, if we were to meet outside somewhere, we'd meet at Chick-fil-A, we'd meet at McDonald's, we'd meet at the mall, you know what's saying? We get to talking about things, and you hear me mention something like that, you know, it's no big deal, right? But it's almost seemed like whenever we come into this environment, it's almost like when you mention something, you know, if it ain't Billy Graham or, you know, if it ain't Adrian Rogers, it's like, oh, what's he doing listening to that? You know, it's the venue that can cause you, right? They can be a little bit like that. But if you'll read, and I got to looking, and I knew this was in there, but I couldn't find it. But in Luke chapter number 14, where Jesus is talking, where they're having the parable about the steward. You know, the guy comes in, he's like, listen, you've been mismanaging my stuff. And then, you know, I'm fixing to take you out, right? So he's like, man, what am I going to do? I can't dig ditches. You know, I'm too poor. I'm too proud to beg. So that's whenever he goes through and he starts slashing everybody's stuff, right? Remember, because he's wanting to have somewhere to go whenever he gets kicked out of this place. Jesus comes in and he says that the children of this world are wiser in their generation than the children of light. Now, basically, for me, what I'm taking from that, an application is we can learn from anybody. We can learn all kinds of stuff from all kinds of people. It's a matter of being teachable, but it's also mainly a matter of everything that we hear, we filter through this, right? We can hear, so, you know, if I got my truck's in the garage right now getting worked on, and, you know, to be honest with you, I really don't care if the guy that's working on it is saved. I just hope he's good at his job, you know. I hope that he's saved. Man, I'd love for that to be a blessing, you know. But as long as I can leave there and my truck still operates well, I'm going to appreciate him for doing a good job, right? There's things that we can learn from the people of this world, but once again, it all gets filtered through this. As I'm listening to some of this podcast, I'm watching this TV show, you know, and talk about everything that's coming in. It's like, man, that just hits. That's got such a good hit to it. That's got some application to it, right? So I'm listening to podcasts. It's Jocko Willink, and he's introducing, or he's speaking with this guy. You may have heard of him. His name is Andrew Huberman. Now, this guy is a neuroscientist with Stanford. He's a tenured professor with Stanford. If you're interested in listening to it, it is a fantastic, I'm going to hit just some highlights here, but it's a fantastic podcast. It's about 5 hours long. So if you're able to listen to stuff at work, or if you're going to have a lot of windshield time, I would encourage you to listen to this. This man gives great insights to the physiology of why we are the way that we are. What happens in our brain? How did our brains operate? We're talking about dopamine. He talks about adrenaline. He talks about all of these, you know, serotonin and stuff, and how that our body reacts and what causes us to do these things, right? So I'm listening to him talk about this stuff, and he's talking about how that dopamine affects us, right? And he brings out, he does it in these great wordy fashions, you know, and just gives all the, you know, where it comes from the brain and all this other stuff. And I'm just, if there's people out here, if some of you guys know more than I do, feel free to correct me. You know, I'm new in this kind of, you know, biology of the brain and stuff. But anyway, so he says that dopamine is the molecule that is motivation. It's pursuit. It's desire, right? It's what you have a thought about doing something and you desire to do it, so it drives you in. And once you're in that, it's adrenaline that is that effort, okay? So, for instance, and here's another thing, you know, got the name, you know, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak, right? Application to that is for us in our world, in our daily lives, right? There's a lot of things that we think about that we want to do or that we want to try to change in our lives, and we can think about those things, right? You may think, you know what, tomorrow morning I'm going to get up, I'm just going to start running, you know, or I'm going to start walking, or I'm just going to start doing a little exercise or something, right? When you think about that, you get excited about that, you just got to hit a dopamine. Right? You can actually it creates a pleasure system within our brain, right? And you can get that hit just from thinking about doing something, right? So that spirit, in a sense, right? It's like, okay, in the morning, yeah, I'm going to go on, I'm going to set that alarm clock, going to get up about 4:30, get stretched out, you know, get ready. 4:30 comes, what the heck was I thinking? That was crazy. Tomorrow. We'll do that tomorrow, right? The flesh is weak, right? So when you think about that, right, then whenever you get to that point of where it is, see, that dopamine is gone, right? Several hours later, when that alarm clock goes off and you just really did start bulldogging into that pillow, right? And you're like, wouldn't it be awesome if you was just as sleepy tired at like, say, 9 o'clock as you are at about 4:30, 5 o'clock? Wouldn't that be great? Oh, man, how fantastic. Just lay down and go right to sleep. But it's almost right before that alarm goes off that you just found that magical spot. And you're like, how does that work? So anyway, dopamine, what it does is it is that one that pushes you. It gives you that motivation, that desire, right? And then once you get into that, it is adrenaline. Now, often we think of adrenaline as, mom got filled up with adrenaline when they wrecked their car and they lifted the car completely off the kid, right? Which is true, but you always have an amount of dopamine, you always have an amount of adrenaline that's flowing through your system at all times, right? And this guy goes through and he explains how that you have that system, that you're kind of a two-part system. You have that motivation and effort, then you have that of relaxation that's like serotonin and oxytocin. And when you can understand, it's fantastic. When you can understand that you're a two-part system, and that a lot of people, or most people, or most of the time, that seesaw is just tilted just a little bit more one way or the other, right? Either you have a hard time slowing down and relaxing, or you have a hard time getting motivated. If you can understand why that is, being aware of these things brings peace and it brings power. Understanding why how that you're geared into the way that you are, right? So I'm going through these things and I'm thinking about this, and as I read through, let's just go ahead, man, I'm going to get to talking. We ain't going to read the verse. We probably need to start off with that, don't we? Verse number 1, that's as far as we're going to get. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for. It is the evidence of things not seen. Now, depending on what version you're reading, it may say that faith is the assurance or the realization of things hoped for. And it may say that it is the conviction of things not seen. Really, any of those fit. All of that works right there, okay? So whenever I got to thinking about that, I'm listening to this guy talk about this dopamine and how did it works and how did it's this motivator. And he talks about how when you get up in the morning, the reason that you wake up is because your body temperature, you have a circadian rhythm that's within your body, right? And when you get that rhythm out of whack, that's when you get sick, that's when you get jet lag and all that stuff, right? So when you wake up in the morning, it's because your body temperature, cortisol has hit your blood flow, it's hit your release from your brain, and it's caused your body temperature to rise, right? And that's what wakes you up. Well, when you wake up, you've got what's called adenosine. That's still in your blood, and it causes you to feel, you wake up. I mean, nobody wakes up like, hey, well, no, good morning, yeah, good to see you. Now we know some people that are similar to that, but nobody really wakes up like that, right? So we wake up, and the first thing, if you're anything that you like my house, you're just stumbling in, you're trying to you're out, and you're going right straight to the microwave, 2 minutes, and then you're going, finding that Folgers, right? Finding some of that vanilla, finding some of that French vanilla, some of that caramel, right? And see, right now I'm getting a dopamine off of that. And any morning, But that's our routine. That's what we do. So we go to try to wake up, to try to get ourselves awake, right? So what this guy is explaining is what you're doing whenever you wake up like that is you've got to give your body time to flush that stuff out of your system. Flush that cortisol, flush that adenosine out. When you don't do that, when you take in caffeine, you're awakening those dopamine signals. You're awakening that stuff in your mind. But what's happening is the receptors are still in your body. So you're using that dopamine, and you have a reservoir of dopamine, right? But there's all kinds of things that can bring it out. So I can get up in the morning, I can turn on the right kind of music, I got a dopamine hit. I can grab a cup of coffee, I got a dopamine hit. I can think about, something exciting that I'm going to do that day, I got a dopamine. So I'm getting it from various different places, right? But if you think about it, almost like a garden hose, like one of those soaker hoses, it's got a whole bunch of holes in it. You can eventually tap out of dopamine, okay? And when you do tap out, that's when you hit the bottom. That's whenever you come down and you hit, if you wake up in the morning and you're getting started with the coffee and you're getting, this guy calls it pharmacology, might be hitting a Red Bull or a Monster or something like that. And then somewhere around 2 or 3 o'clock, it's just like, bam, bam. You're like, what is happening, man? It's because now you've depleted all of that dopamine. You don't have no drive. The only drive that you have is the one to the car, and you want to do some mechanic work when you get home, and that is doing nothing but putting a rear end in a recliner, right? That's the only kind of motivation. That's the only kind of thing that you want to do. So when you're aware of that, but when God, it was so awesome. So when you become aware of how that our minds are, right? So I'm thinking of this, and I'm looking through it, and I'm like, so what's the application here spiritually, right? If dopamine is what gives me this pursuit, if it's what gives me this drive, if it's what motivates me, right? And if I can learn to control it, then maybe that can give me some understanding into my spiritual life as well. Because what I began to think about is I'm reading through this, and this is known as the Hall of Faith, right? These are the heroes of faith. I mean, we've got Abraham, we've got Sarah, we've got Noah, we've got Isaac, Jacob. I mean, we've got everybody, all of the big names from the Old Testament, right? And as I'm thinking about that, I'm thinking, we can look into this and we can read pretty much any one of the stories of these guys or these ladies. We can read their entire life in just a few minutes. Right? I'm thinking about Noah. God says, build a boat. 120 years later, God shows up. Right? So we have 120 years. As best as we can tell, he didn't hear nothing else. Right? And we think that his whole life was this big red. We don't think that brother didn't even have no, I mean, this wasn't, Adam and Eve where there was no in-laws, wasn't nobody else. But there was in-laws, right? There was other people talking trash. We're out in the desert and you're wanting to build this thing. Do you even know what you're doing? I mean, he had those days, right? He had those days. We go on and we look at Abraham. And Abraham, we think that Abraham was just kind of chilling back. All of a sudden he saw stars like, okay, let's go. You know what I mean? He obeyed. He took off, which we understand that. We think that we're told later on that all of these are given for our examples, right? And that these men done great things, but they were still human beings. They still had bad days. They still had things that they had to fight through. For us, what I gained from this is we can read through this and we can put these people on such a supernatural, super spiritual pedestal that we can become discouraged. And think, how could there's no way, I'm never going to have the opportunity to build an ark, right? I'm not going to be called to walk and, sojourn in a foreign land. There is no foreign lands anymore, really, right? There's nothing to conquer. I'm not going to lead, 3 million people across, you know what I'm saying? So we can begin to think, what is it for me, right? What is that for me? And that's just one part of it. Now imagine you're speaking with somebody at work. Imagine you're speaking with your neighbor, whatever it is. It's that person that, whenever you get around, it's like, man, I had a real good Bible study, this morning, got prayed with God, and I've been reading, and I've got this book that I've been reading, and it showed me this stuff. And, when you're around those and you're thinking, what's wrong with me? I really, I don't have that much of a desire to pray. I really don't have that much of a desire to read. I don't have that much of a desire to study. Now, I'm not saying that there's not a spiritual factor, and I'm not saying, even whenever your dopamine hits rock bottom, you can still press through and do some stuff. What I am saying is if we can recognize, right, that in the morning, whenever we wake up and we've got this reservoir and we're getting everything set, if we can coast that thing through, when we get to the point, if you're studying in the morning, fantastic. If it's something that you try to do later today, you want to get all of the day, you might be one of those. I wake up in the morning, I think of all the stuff that I've got to do. I think of everything that's got to go on, and I just can't sit down. I can't focus. I'm better off when I do it at night. Everything's done. The kids is down. The house is quiet. I can really, I can focus. Fantastic, right? But you got to recognize that dopamine you got to keep it steady. You got to keep it on a keel, right? And you do that throughout the day. His main thing, because there's the system that is that drive and that effort, then there's that system of relaxation, right? God has built within us this dopamine and serotonin because it is to drive us. Effort is supposed to have reward at the end of it, not reward without effort. And we can get reward all day long with no effort. All I got to do is open that thing up and start getting at that. I'm getting dopamine hits. I'm going to roll through TikTok, dopamine hits. I can watch some folks up there doing Running Man, dopamine hits. I can watch fails, dopamine hits. Right? I can go grab a bag of Doritos, dopamine hits. I can get it all day long, right? Without any effort. And that's not how God designed us to be. He designed it to be an effort, then a reward. An effort, than a reward. Because whenever where we get so out of whack is when we get so overwhelmed with that dopamine, with that adrenaline, and then we just don't want to do nothing, right? I found myself doing this just the other morning. It was Tuesday morning, right? Woke up, boom, 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 5:15, boom, 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 boom. Like, what in the world was that, right? I reach over, grab a hold of Brandy, make sure she didn't get up or anything. And she says, what was that? I said, well, it wasn't a figment of my imagination. Crap, if you heard it too, now that means I got to get up, right? So I get up, grab my personal protection device, start going through the house, step out, look around, make sure all the doors is shut and everything's shut, like, well, whatever, right? So, fix my coffee, grab a load of towels, get ready to put them in the dish or down in the washing machine, and there's a blanket in there. It's all to one side. Those who know, that thing had now here was my thought. That it had gotten all that load had gotten offside, right? And it was just boom, boom, boom. You know what sound when a washing machine, when that load gets in, you're just like, Lord of God, we're out of here. I mean, you just hear it. It hits so hard. And I thought, my word. But to me, that didn't make sense because this is 5:15, and I know she didn't get up at 4:30 to put this thing in the, in the wash. And so I'm thinking, I was like, well, maybe it's some sort of safety thing. Maybe the washing machine does it. It just resets itself after so many hours, so that it don't get soaked or mildew or whatever. So I'm telling David about it later on, It's like, did he tell you about the washing machine thing? So I tell him, it's like, oh, no, that was me. I was like, what? He's like, no, that was me. He's like, my fan was making noises, and I couldn't get it to shut up, so I was just beating it down. I said, at 5:15? Lord have mercy. So anyway, so I'm awake. I'm up, right? Now I find myself, I'm awake now. And really I'm feeling kind of stupid because I feel like I am Jocko. I'm a seal walking through the house. You know what I'm saying? Give it that. Only to find out, to think that it was a blanket that was in the washing machine and to find out it was my son beating the fan down. So I go outside, got my coffee, and I just, start checking my emails, just mess around, check on Facebook, Yeah, so it's pretty cool. Hit the shorts, I'm scrolling. And I capture myself. I'm like, whoa, you got to do something. You got to do, you can't just do this, So at 6:30, I start washing cars. Yep. Start washing my wife's car and then start washing my car, But what I'm saying, that can get a hold of us. I mean, it's got that algorithm. He mentions in that it's called some intermittent reward, right? You're watching, you're scrolling through the shorts, you're scrolling through TikTok, you're scrolling through whatever, and you're trying to find a good meme, you're trying to find a good dance or car wreck or something, you're scrolling, oh, there's a good one, right? And then you scroll through 6 more, oh, there's a good one, scroll through 3 more, oh, that algorithm, man, it grabs a hold of you and it pulls you in. And your dopamine and you're unloading that dopamine because you can look down and you're like, how has it already been 30 minutes? I've been here for 30 minutes, glory, hallelujah. Sit in the doctor's office for 30 minutes. And it's like, right? Because dopamine affects your perception of time. Now, how am I tying that back into faith? We get around these people, we start reading about these people, and we start setting these folks up to be super spiritual. Then what we do is we begin to condemn ourselves. And we begin to think, well, maybe I'm not as spiritual. Maybe I'm not as good. And as soon as that thought enters our brain, we give an opportunity for the devil to step in. It's like, you know what, you're not. You know what I mean? You've been doing all this stuff. You probably shouldn't even. You should quit going. Why are you even trying to read? You've been reading for 30 minutes. You tried reading this morning. You couldn't get out of bed. You set the alarm clock, said you was going to start praying. You was going to start reading. You didn't do none of that. You're not as good. You'll never be as good as him. You'll never be as good as her. Right? Got to recognize. I'm not saying there's not a spiritual warfare. I'm not saying that by no means at all. But I'm also saying there are some chemical things. There are some stuff that's going on in ourselves, the way that God has set us up in our systems and the way that we work that is changed. And probably since the Industrial Revolution have we always had this opportunity to just get dopamine free, right? Before then, that greatest generation ever was at World War II generation, you go back and look at them, these were people that were born on farms, right? That were raised doing things. They had to trust God to bring the rain, to cause things to grow. Their idle time, they had those times of decompression throughout the whole day when they just kind of sitting on the front. Man, we always talk about the front porch. Right? God, I remember my grandpa's front porch. I love going out there. Man, we sat out there for hours. Sat over here on the Pleasant Hill Road, sat beside the prison, just watching the cars go by. There wasn't nothing you could see. It wasn't like you was watching a cow, watching anything. We was watching cars go by. You know? I'd be listening to him. That one ain't doing 35. Pour into it, boy. But there's those times of decompression. There's times where we just allow our mind to just reset, to just unwind, right? You find it hard to go to bed. You got to get away from that stuff. And so when we understand and we're aware of how our brains work, how our bodies work, and how that can affect us spiritually as well, then to have that awareness and to have that understanding and how that faith works. Understanding that I can have these battles within my mind that have created because of some sort of data, because I've worked up all my dopamine, because I have not worked up enough. Maybe I'm too relaxed and I need to do some stuff, right? Think about those things. He mentions in it that we should be aware of our emotions before, during, and after every event. Be aware. Understand why you think what you think. Why you don't. Why am I upset? Why am I happy? What is causing me this? How is this working? How can I sit this? One of the things that I saw that as I was reading this and I was thinking about that. Another thing that I saw is there's an aspect here of faith that gives us an authority. Okay? Not an arrogance, not a conceit. Ephesians 3 tells us that we have a boldness, an access with confidence through Him, right? So I'm watching this, and it's amazing how this stuff works out. So I'm watching this TV show. It's about Reggie Jackson. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's his documentary. And he's talking about all of this stuff that was going on whenever he was coming up through the ranks, whenever he was, finally getting on and getting good and stuff. And this was all during the time of integration. And he was talking about how that the black players most of the time couldn't stay in the same hotels as the white players. They couldn't eat at the same restaurants as the white players. They didn't get paid the same amount of money as the white players. They would have better records. And he was talking about, how they would negotiate and all this other stuff. And he was talking about when he played for the Yankees, how George Steinbrenner didn't want to pay him as much, and he had a better record and all this other stuff. And so he's talking about all that stuff, and then he says, but whenever I step up to the plate, he said, every bit of that goes away. He said, when I step up to the plate, he said, it's that guy's job to get that ball across the plate, and I'm not going to let him get it across. And I thought, man, there's an authority to faith. You ever seen somebody put on a uniform? You ever seen an NBA player, professional player, anybody professional, whatever, when they put it on, they're like, oh, I got to go play today, How many of them have you ever heard whenever they're interviewing them, they say, whenever I step on the field, I'm the best that's on the field, right? You kind of got to have a little bit of that. You really got to kind of have a little bit of that. When you step out there, you got to know that you're one of the best. You got to believe that you have the right to be where you are, that you have earned that right, that if you're playing for a team, they've drafted you for this, they're paying you for this, you have the authority to be in that uniform and in that place, right? Every one of these people that we're going to learn about as we go through this, each one of them, that faith gave them an authority. It gave them a boldness. Now, we're not going to build boats. We're not going to lead folk, right? We're not going to, probably that whole bearing children whenever you're 90, that's probably gone away with too, right? But where you are in your life, if you're breathing and you're a saved child of God, you have a calling on your life and you have an authority to step into that calling. When others look around you and they're like, what are you doing? Why are they? When they're passing down on you and you know that you're doing what you're supposed to, you have an authority to step in. Just like whenever he was stepping, he has that authority to step. When a player steps on, they have that authority to step. You can step into that place with a boldness and with a confidence, regardless of what you're called in to do. I was telling my wife, like, you're called to be a mother. Be a mother with authority. You're called to be a wife. Be a wife with authority. I'm called to be a manager. I'll be a manager with authority. Not necessarily, like I said, not with an arrogance, not with a conceit, but with a conviction of understanding that I believe this is what God has called me to do. And I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. And I'm not going to let anybody talk me away from that or talk me down from that. Until I feel like God is moving me and changing me, whenever I step into that place every day, when I step into that role every day, that is where God has called me to do, and I'm going to do it for the glory of God. Doesn't mean I'm not going to have bad days. Doesn't mean that there's not going to be failures. Doesn't mean that there's not going to be times where I've got to look over and say, that was my bad, guys. I made the wrong call. We're going to have to do something else. Right? That's just part of it. Faith acts. Faith has an authority. I was watching what Victor was saying up here Sunday morning, where he's talking about, going to Caswell. And I thought, man, I heard him talk about these kids and what all that they saw whenever they were gone. How the people was loving on each other, was hugging on each other. And how that we got to do that when we're in here. Ain't it amazing of how whenever you can get away from where you're used to, what is common, and you can disconnect of how it's just like, God, this is great. And you feel free. But it's like when we come together in some venues, it's like we feel like there's a certain program. We feel like there's a certain way that I've got to act. Because I can't act weird. We act weird when we go to the Crawdads game. We act weird when we go to the race cars. Watch the race cars. I act weird whenever I go to the track. He mentioned that about us loving on each other, hugging on each other, not being afraid. And listen, I'm just as guilty. Okay, we was in here not this Sunday morning. I think I can't remember 2 or 3 Sunday mornings ago, and they were singing that song. The evidence. I see the evidence. Man, glory to God! I'm telling you right now, that'd make you run all the way to the house. And it was just me. Brandy wasn't feeling good. She was sitting right there. David was sitting up. He was sitting right up there up front. And man, and that's just, when you have kids, it's like you really see it then. I mean, you can see the evidence. Because you think of all that you've done, you think of all that you've been through, and you're like, Lord God, why do I have this? Why did you bless me with this? I know who I am. I know what I am. Right? And I'm standing there and I'm like, man, I need to tell David that. No, I ain't going to tell David that. He ain't going to understand that. I ain't going to tell him. Evidence of your good. I ain't going to tell him that. He ain't going to understand what that is. Evidence of your good. And I'm battling it. I'm like, why am I battling it? I'm like, Lord God, why am I really battling this? How ridiculous is that? Faith steps on pride. Faith pushes pride down. That's why God hates pride, because it keeps us from being active in our faith. And there's sometimes where you're going to do it and it ain't going to make no sense at all, but it's just that nudging. It may just be one of them things where God's just like, I need you to get out the nest a little bit. I need you to be a little bit uncomfortable. Right? So I finally did. I reached up and I said, listen here, young man. I said, there ain't no way you can see this from where you are, but you are the evidence to me, sir. It's that faith that's active. It's not dead. James says, let me see your works. Let me see your faith through your works. Let me see that stuff. Let it be active. It's not static. It's not stationary. It's active. I got into, finish this up, got into doing some stuff a few Saturdays ago. Woke up and it was one of those rare events, the hunt where my desire to do something and what I had to do actually lined up, It's like I want to do what I'm getting up to do, Knew it was going to be a nice day, had some things I wanted to take care of, right? I was looking forward to it. Started into this little project, right? It blows up. It goes crazy. I'm like, Lord God, all I had to do was flip some switches, turn some stuff on, and now it's not working, and now this is going to cost me, $200 to get this fixed. Glory to God. So, okay, I need a confidence builder, so I'm going to go do something else, So I get over into this other project, start working on it, and it starts going crazy. So I'm like, Lord God. Starting to get aggravated. Take off, go down, working on building a bike, right? And I go down here to the Yamaha place, and I got to get some coolant for it. Get the coolant, and I make that grand mistake of whenever I leave, I start looking at other bikes. I'm like, oh, Lord. Now, I knew some of the new ones, how much they was, but outside, they had some used ones, right? Now, I'm rebuilding a YZ 250, an 01 two-stroke, rebuilding it. They had a 2022 YZ 250, right? And all I could see is the numbers, and I made the mistake going over there, and I took that tag, and I said, oh, Lord. There's a guy that works there that we've come to know real well, and I said, come here, man. I said, I want to ask you something. I said, you guys, you and your dad, you've been working on bikes forever, been rebuilding, know everything about them. I said, at what point do you decide, you know what, we're too deep into this, it's time to stop? I said, because right now I have receipts for more than what you want for that bike. He said, you've done past that point. I said, oh, Lord. Oh, so all right, man. So I leave, and I'll tell you, so I leave, right? And as soon as I get back into the truck, I'm thinking, I know I've got to stop. I've got to get another part for another project. It's going to cost me a couple $100. I know that I've got to, now I know in order to finish this, and this bike I ain't even got it running yet. At this point, it ain't even running. Right? I'm like, man, I don't even know if it's going to run. I got some of this stuff that's not working. I don't know if this is going to work. And maybe I can send this part back. I haven't used it. Maybe I can get some of my money back. Maybe I can take it to a friend of mine. He charges, like, say, hey, man, if you'll help me, let me help you work on this. Could you charge me less? But it's not, because he don't. And my main brain's just running, right? Like it's the final lap of the Kentucky Derby. And I mean, it's just going crazy. And I woke up excited about that day, Like, glory to God. Now all of a sudden, mine's just running. It's going crazy, okay? I'm getting right there beside the Dollar General down Colony Springs Road. And I've run this ramp all the way from there back to the house. And I get to the Dollar General, and I'm like, whoa, Randall, stop. Whoa, take a breath, bro. There ain't nothing that you're doing that has to be done, right? Ain't going to change nobody's life. No matter what you do, it doesn't matter what's happening. Okay, just stop. Just chill. And I began to pray. And I was like, Lord, I don't know how you're going to help me. And I don't know what you're going to do. But I need you to step in. I don't know how you're going to do it. I don't know what it's going to be like. Right? Mine kind of starts going, I'm hoping that I'll get to go to the mailbox and there'll be that, $3 million check that somebody just magically here. That's what I'm hoping for. But that's probably not how you're going to do it. But at any rate, if you should decide to do that, I will be grateful. But I don't know how you're going to do it. But I'll tell you this. Here's what I'm going to do, Lord. I'm going to keep my eyes and my ears open, and I'm going to see what you're going to do. I get back to the house, got my parts and stuff, and I'll get back into the projects, right? Get back into doing what I was going to do. And along the way, I'm like, I'm listening, I'm checking, but I ain't, About 30 minutes later, I get a phone call. I said, hello? I said, how you doing, man? Got you on my mind. I said, oh, you better be quiet. You don't know what you're doing right now. I said, yeah, man, just had you on my mind. Started praying for you and just couldn't get you off my mind. So I decided to give you a call. I said, you better hush your mouth. You better be quiet because you don't know what's going on right now. Because I knew when I was starting to pray this, right? And just for kicks and giggles, I went back the next day. And I pulled up on Life 360 about where I was. At 10:41, I was passing by Dollar General, okay? At 11:10, I got this phone call. And he said, I've been on your mind for about 30 minutes. You've had me on my mind for 30 minutes. I couldn't get you off, and I couldn't get you off, so I decided to give you a call. I said, you better shut your mouth right now. You know why? Because I wasn't doing nothing that was crazy spiritual. I wasn't evangelizing. I wasn't in deep study. I wasn't in deep prayer. I wasn't in ministry. I wasn't doing so. I was in my little world doing my own little thing. I was caught up in something that had no spiritual, no eternal value whatsoever. And I began to pray to God, and He heard me at that very moment. Before I could close my mouth on my prayer, He sent me right into somebody. Said, man, you need to get a hold of it. You need to start praying for this guy. You need to start praying for this guy. That faith is real. I didn't stop on the side and start, sulking and, well, what is me, you know what I'm saying? It's like, okay, God, I don't know what you're going to do, but you're going to have to do something. I need you to bring it. I'm going to be watching, and I'm going to see how you're going to do it. I'm going to continue into my day because faith does not stop, right? It's not, just standing in line at the grocery store and just, It's still working, it's still going, but it's looking. It's like, how are you going to get into this? What are you going to do today, God? How are you going to infiltrate my life and my world and show me that you are real? Because it is real. Faith is real. Faith is alive. Faith is active. There's a million different things that we could say about it. I hope something that has been brought out will be a help to you. Hope you guys have a great vacation if you're on vacation, Pastor.